What's going on, traders? My name's Dillon and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm super excited to be sharing with you the very first episode where we actually start coding within MetaTrader 5 in the new MetaTrader 5 series on the channel. So by the end of this series, we're going to be able to have the knowledge to create our very own expert advisors, so that way we have our expert advisor trading the markets for us. And that is super, super exciting. I know a lot of you have been hanging around to actually be able to create your own EAs, particularly in MetaTrader 5. So we're going to start the conversation today. Now, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is the event handling functions. Now, there's three very common event handling functions, and the reason why I bring this up is because when I first started in MetaTrader 5, I actually did not know what these event handling functions did. I knew I had to use them, but I didn't really understand them too well. So assuming that other people are going to have the same questions, I might as well explain it here briefly. So the OnInit function is a function that is called on the initialization of the expert advisor. And once that function is complete, it's not run again at all in our expert advisor. Now, the opposite, of course, is true at the tail end. So when the expert advisor finishes up, we have the OnDeinit function, and this function is called on the deinitialization of the expert advisor, of course, at the end of our expert advisor. Now, in between all of that, we have the OnTick function, and this is where majority of our expert advisor will actually live in. And this is where, for example, we're going to execute our trades, look at our indicators and the like, and it's going to run every time a new tick is received. So just quickly, this function, or the OnTick function, is called when a new tick event occurs. And basically what a new tick event is when there is a generation of a new quote that is received from our broker into our terminal. So for example, when there's a new change in price, that could lead to a new tick, and then that new tick would of course run the OnTick function for the code, and whatever's in that code would then execute. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is setting up the foundations of our code, and that's going to include some include functions, global variables, and input variables. So we're going to be discussing that too. And then finally, we're going to be looking at some common functions, mainly the print function and the comment function. So the print function displays a message in the logs, and the comment function outputs a comment in the top corner of the chart. Now, these are going to be your best friends moving forward, because to understand how our code is functioning, or how our expert advisor is functioning and making sure it's doing the right things, the print function and the comment function is going to tell us just that. So these are going to be very, very important moving forward. Now, I mentioned this in the last episode, and I'm going to quickly touch on it again, but these are some of the things that you might need to know first, and in my opinion, you should know first before proceeding with the series. So assuming that you are comfortable with proceeding with the series, I would assume that you have a basic understanding of coding and coding language. I would also assume that you have trading experience and understand basic trading logic, for example, and preferably in the forex markets. And then the final thing is you have a basic understanding of math functions, and a basic understanding of arrays would be preferred. The reason why I mention arrays specifically is because MetaQuotes 5 or MetaTrader 5 operates primarily in arrays. So you really need to understand how arrays work, and this is going to be a big advantage when using MetaTrader 5. Now, this is the main reason why MetaTrader 5 is much more powerful than, for example, MetaQuotes 4 or MetaTrader 4 and TradingView, is because of this array functionality. However, it does make things very more complicated. And this is, again, why I warn that MetaTrader 5 is levels above MetaTrader 4 or TradingView, and why you should have some experience. Now, if you do get stuck along the way, of course, you can always revisit these videos. They're always going to be active on YouTube. I don't have any intentions on taking them down. So if you do need to go back, for example, and watch my TradingView series, because you might want to start off there, and I do recommend starting off there if you're just starting out in coding, then you can always come back in the future to these future videos when you are ready to transition into something a bit more powerful. Now, some of the resources that I just went through, for example, from some of the slides, was the resources you see on the screen. But the main one that I want to mention is, of course, mql5.com/en/docs. This is going to be your best friend moving forward in the future. And the reason being is a lot of information that we do need is on the MetaQuotes 5 docs page, and even in the forums as well. If you got any questions, it might be worth just doing a Google search. It'll take you to one of the forums, for example, and you might actually find your answer in there. So saying that, MetaQuotes5.com, very, very important for you to actually use. So that's, I guess, the brief introduction. So let's start coding. Now, I am going to assume that you have MetaTrader 5 already installed onto your computer, and you also have the MetaTrader terminal that connects to your broker already installed. Again, you could be using a demo account. It's recommended you use a demo account, of course. So I'm going to assume that you set that all up. If you haven't set it all up, there's plenty of resources on the internet to show you how to set it all up. I'm not going to do it in this video. I think it's pretty easy, and majority of you should already have it set up anyway, considering that a lot of you have been asking for this. So I'm going to assume that you have it, and there's two main terminals that you're going to need to be familiar with. The one that you see on the screen is the Meta Editor, and this is where, of course, we do our coding for our expert advisors. And then the other one is what we're going to be seeing in the future is the terminal for your actual broker, for example. So those are the two main ones, but what we're seeing on the screen is the Meta Editor terminal. So this is also what you see on the screen is a quick indication of what we're going to be doing today. However, I'm going to take it back to the start and actually start this EA from the very beginning, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is actually start a new expert advisor, and all I need to do is go new, expert advisor template, and I'm going to have to name my expert advisor, and I'm going to call it MQL5 YouTube series. Now, of course, you can name yours whatever you want, and that's just what I'm naming mine. And I hit next, and then this is going to give me some additional options for some further event handling functions. I'm not going to need any of those ones, so I'm going to hit next, and then I'm going to hit finish. And here we go. We have the start of our expert advisor. And what I mentioned before is we have the OnInit function, the OnDeinit function, and the OnTick function. These are those three event handling functions that gets populated when we do create a new expert advisor. And these are very common ones and ones that you're going to be using essentially all the time. So that is why I wanted to mention it, and that is what we're going to be playing with a little bit today. So the very first thing I want to do is demonstrate the OnInit function, and a good way to demonstrate the OnInit function, which again is a function that on the initialization of the expert advisor, something happens. So what's that something? Well, what we're going to be doing is printing hello world. So if you come from a coding background, you would know that that's the very common thing to do is write hello world somewhere. And we're going to do it in the OnInit function. So, and the other thing that I'm going to be doing is going to look at our very first function, or custom function, if you will, and that is the print function. So we're going to write our hello world using the print function. And again, the print function is going to display hello world in the logs, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. So I've just typed in hello world, and because print of course takes a string variable, it has to be within the quotation marks. And then at the end of any of our functions, we need to put the semicolon in. So if we don't have the semicolon, then it's going to come up with an error code. If you come from TradingView, you didn't need to do this. However, in MetaTrader, if you come from MetaTrader 4, you do need to do this. In MetaTrader 5, it's exactly the same. So you need to put in semicolon. And that's basically it. That's the print function. We just got print and then a string, and we've got hello world and semicolon. Now, to check that our code is actually working, we need to compile the code. And the compile button for the code is up here. And basically, I clicked on that. We've got no errors down the bottom. And basically what the compile function does, or the compiling actually does, is actually runs through the codes and it actually checks if there's any errors or not. So as I mentioned, we do need a semicolon in here, but if I remove the semicolon, it's going to come up with an error, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So I just compiled it again, and here we can see we've got an error down the bottom, and we can see the error mark over here. So if I click on this error, this pops up over here, and it takes me into the rough location of where the error is going to be. And we can see here that it says a semicolon expected, and it's taken us to line 19. However, of course, the semicolon doesn't go on line 19, but it goes on the line previously before. So it's actually line 16 that we need to correct the error. But it takes you in the rough spot, which is important. So I've added the semicolon, I've compiled it, seems to be working, no errors, that's good. So I'm actually going to show you what this does, and I'm actually going to switch over now to the actual terminal for MetaTrader 5. And this is what it looks like here. Now, just quickly, I want to mention yours might look a little bit different. I've got, for example, all 28 currency pairs in my market watch over here. Now, it's a very good idea, and it is required that for whatever currency pairs that you are going to be trading, they need to be in the market watch. So it's a good opportunity now to add in your currency pairs by just going down here and then typing in the currency pair that you need to add in. I've got all 28 currency pairs because I plan on trading all 28 currency pairs for my expert advisor. And by all 28 currency pairs, I mean major, minor, crosses, etc. from the 8 common currencies. So assuming that you've got all of this set up, it's not mandatory now, but you might as well do it while I mentioned it. You'd have a screen like this. So how we test our Expert Advisor is coming down to this tab over here. I might just move you across a little bit. Just coming over to this tab over here, and we can see the strategy tester window. And what we need to do is go to the settings. And this is where we actually select our Expert Advisors to actually, trade for us. Now, this is all backtesting purposes at the moment. But what I'm going to do is find my Expert Advisor by going to this drop-down menu. I haven't saved it to a particular folder, but I can see that under the the examples, or not the examples, but the experts panel, I can see that I've got the MetaQuotes 5 YouTube series, and that's the new trading robot or Expert Advisor that I've created. So I'm just going to double click that. And now that's selected. Now, I'm not going to worry about any of this down here just at this stage. However, the one thing that I do want to show is this one over here. So just for today, or what we're going to be doing is we want to actually use the visualization mode to display on the charts, indicators, and trades. So using this visualization or having this one ticked will actually bring up another window, and that's actually going to show our Expert Advisor backtesting in the past. And this is where we're going to actually see how our Expert Advisor is actually performing, making sure that our indicators are working properly, that it's entering trades properly. And this is going to take a little bit more time because, of course, it's more visual. However, it's very important, particularly if you're just creating your Expert Advisor and troubleshooting it. So with that ticked, I'm going to hit start, and you can't see start because it's on in front of my head. You can kind of see it a little bit there, but I'm going to hit start, and a new window is going to pop up for me. And then we can see this window over here, and our Expert Advisor is running. Now, you can't really see much, and it's not really doing much because we don't actually have any code in here. But what I want to show you is this line down the bottom here. And we can see that it has printed hello world at this timestamp of this backtest. So this is actually on the initialization of the Expert Advisor, and it's actually done what exactly the OnInit function does, or the on initialization function, and that is it ran through the function, and the function said to print out hello world in the journal, which is down here in the journal, and it's done exactly that. So that's really cool. Now, of course, we want our Expert Advisor to do a little bit more, so that's where we're going to actually do some coding in the OnTick function. So I've come back to my meta editor, and we're going to actually do some coding. Now, the first thing I actually want to do is set up some foundational code. As I mentioned before, I want to put in some include functions and maybe set up, for example, some global variables and input functions. Now, I'm just going to copy this slab across because it's very common to actually include all of this, but I'll quickly run through it. But basically, these functions over here, these include functions, are going to be very important for you to use, particularly for all of your Expert Advisors. So the first one is the include function for the trade.mqh file, and basically and the one under it is the seed trade pointer to trade. And basically what this does is it allows us to actually use some of the functions within the trade library so that we can actually enter trades and execute trades, for example. So that's going to be very important because this pointer or this library is actually going to be able to do the trading for us and actually execute the trades with our broker. So that's important to have, and it's something that essentially all of our Expert Advisors are going to need. Now, the next thing is setting up some additional variables. And these are all input functions, and the way we know it's an input function is by having this this additional text at the start of the declaration. Instead of just having, for example, an int or a string, we have input as well on the front of it, and that's how MetaQuotes knows that this is an input function. And basically, input functions allows the user to not have to do any changes within, of course, MetaEditor. It allows the users to make the changes on the actual terminal itself, which, of course, we're going to go through in a little bit more detail maybe later on. But the first thing we are going to need, if you come from MetaTrader 4, you would know this, is a magic number. And basically a magic number is just a unique identifier for this Expert Advisor, so that way if you've got multiple Expert Advisors trading at the same time, none of them get confused and talk to each other. This magic number allows us to have multiple Expert Advisors not conflicting with each other but trading at the same time. And the way they do that is having a unique identifier. Now, the other one is I'm not going to spend too much time on this one or any time on this one, but this is going to come in handy. Well, not really too much handiness, but it's good to have anyway. But the last one is going to be the applied price, or an input for applied price. And basically this is going to tell our indicators on what we want to actually calculate their values based off. Now, most of the time our indicators are based off the price, or the closing price, or the close of the candle. However, we do have an input option if the user wants to, for example, choose a different methodology on actually calculating the indicator values. But that option is there. Again, it's just a good to have anyway. So the last thing I want to do is actually put in some global variables. And so I'm going to create a global variable that's actually going to help us count how many times the OnTick function runs. And that's how I want to illustrate today the OnTick function and what it does. So I'm going to actually create, for example, a new int. And every time we create a variable, we need to actually declare what that variable is going to be, whether it's an integer, a double, or a string, for example. In TradingView, we didn't have to do that unless it was a float. However, in MetaTrader 5, we do need to do that. Again, MetaTrader 4, if you're coming from that, you'll already know this. So I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call it ticks received count. And I'm going to declare it as, or initialize it at, oh my gosh, if I can type, initialize it with an initial value of 0. And again, I'm just going to put a comment here, counts the number of ticks from counts the number of ticks from the OnInit function. So this is a global variable that, of course, I've created, and it's very important that this global variable, or this variable, is created as a global variable. Now, just quickly, the difference between a global variable and a local variable is global variables can be used for anywhere within the function. So, for example, I can use this variable in the OnTick function down here, or I can use it in the OnInit function on the OnDeinit function if I wanted to, or if I have, for example, custom functions, I can use that in these custom functions too. And if we want to declare a global variable, it has to be up here. Now, a local variable, on the other hand, is if I decided to declare it in the OnTick function. So, for example, instead of it being up here, I had something along the lines in the OnTick function down here. If I declared it down here, then this would create, this would make it a local variable in the OnTick function. And if I wanted to use this same variable, for example, in the OnInit function, I would not be able to do that because it's not declared in the OnInit function over here. It's not declared as a global function. So that is one reason why I've declared this this variable as a global variable. And the other reason why as well is that the OnTick function, the way I want this variable to actually, for example, run, is I want it to be able to count the number of times the ticks are received. So if I actually declared it back in here, every time this OnTick function would run, this will actually initialize the variable, and it would always make the variable equal to 0. So that it wouldn't really help with the counter, because if that's always initializing or resetting to 0, then the counter would be wrong. I want the counter, or I want this variable to remain the same no matter when, no matter if the OnTick function runs again. I don't want it to reset to 0. So that's another reason why I've made it or declared it up here. So hopefully you're following on. And basically now with this variable declared up here, I actually want to call this variable down here, and I've just copied it across, and I just want to do ticks received count. And a good way to do a counter or add 1 to this particular count is do that. So basically all this is doing is this is declared, it's initialized as 0, and then the OnTick function will run. And as I mentioned, the OnTick function will continue to run in a loop every time a new quote is received. So every time a new quote is received, this OnTick function will run, and assuming that it's initialized to 0, the OnTick function will run. It's going to start off at 0, and then it's going to run, and then it's going to add 1 to the actual variable itself. So it's going to go to 0 to 1, and then a new tick might receive, for example, and then it's going to go 1 to 2, 2 to 3, so on and so on. I'm just going to put a comment in here and just say counts the number of ticks received. and then I've just got the counter over here. Awesome. Now, again, we're going to need some way to actually visualize this. I can use the print function. However, I wouldn't recommend using the print function because every time this variable or this OnTick function will run, there's going to be a new line in the journal, and it's actually going to create a new print in the journal, and it's going to make everything messy because there could be, you know, for example, 1,000 of ticks in any given minute, and it's going to make everything very, very convoluted and messy. So if you are doing any changes, for example, to any of these types of variables that might get a little bit messy, it's actually a better idea to use the comment function. And so that was our second comment. Oh, sorry, our second function that we're going to be using. So we're actually going to put in the comment. So we're going to actually put in the comment the ticks received variable. And what's really cool about the comment function is we can actually use concatenate. And the way we concatenate, for example, a string or a series of different values is by using the comma. And I've just put in, next to the comma, I've just put in a string variable. And that is going to be using the quotation marks. And basically I'm going to go ticks received, something like that. So basically this is going to return ticks received, or it's going to show us ticks received, and then the count of ticks over here. So let's see what this does. I'm going to go compile, no error messages. That's really cool. And I'm going to go back to my Expert Advisor terminal. Hit, make sure that this YouTube is selected, yes, and visualization is on, yes. And I'm actually going to start. And there we go. So notice how the price is changing over here. So that means that a new tick is being received. And notice down the bottom, we've also got here, hello world. So that all remains the same. But the addition that we have is this new ticks received counter over here. So every time the price changes or a new quote is received, the OnTick function actually runs. And each time that OnTick function runs, we are getting essentially a new tick coming in, and that counter is increasing. So this counter is actually telling us how many times the OnTick function actually runs. So this is why I wanted to demonstrate the ticks received, because ticks received is very different to, for example, candle open only. And here you saw that the next candle only just opened here. However, we've already counted 200 or so ticks for that last candle over here. So that's a very, very important concept that you need to understand. And that's why I just wanted to mention or start our code with this OnTick counter. Now, just going back to the code, there's just a couple of additions that I just want to put in, and I'm just going to copy those across just in the comment function over here. And this is going to be the final slab of what we're going to be doing. So I've just added a couple of different lines. I've just copied it across, and feel free to type this out. But this will actually complete our essentially template file for moving forward for our expert advisors. Well, you don't really need the hello world, but I'll keep it in there. But just quickly, what I want to show you is this code, what this is doing. Let me compile, make sure there's no errors. But what this is doing is essentially saying expert advisor, what's the expert's magic number? And that's printing it over here or commenting it over here. What's the MetaTrader server time? And it's getting the server time by doing this time current function over here, which is really handy. Ticks received, again, this is the ticks received counter that we were just looking at. And then the symbols that are being traded. And I've got the symbol over here. Now this is just the current symbol that we're using, but this is going to expand later on actually all 28 symbols, for example, or how many currencies that you want to trade simultaneously, but that will show up over here. But just for this stage, I'm using the symbol function to actually get the text for the symbol over here. Now, the other thing that I want to show you here is to create a new row, new line. You just do this over here, so \n/r, and this will do a new row, new line each time. So it will show similar to what we see on the screen here. It will show expert advisor, magic number, the time, then the ticks received, and then the symbol. So it just keeps things a bit more cleaner and neater. So again, I'm going to compile that, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go start again. And now we see a bit more information over here. We see the expert magic number again. We see the MetaTrader 5 server time, and we also see the ticks received over here again. And notice again how the ticks received is counting every time the price changes or a new quote is received. However, it's still counting even though, for example, a new candle's not printed. So it's the ticks within the candle that's being counted. And finally, the symbols being traded. We've got AUD, USD over here, and that's just the one that I was on. So there you go. So that essentially is it. So that is the very start of our expert advisor. That's super exciting. Look how many ticks that was. My goodness, that's crazy. But just to recap, let me go back to the code. Just to recap, what we did is from top to bottom, what we did was input or include some of these include functions, our startup variables, but then also included our very own custom or our first variable, and that was a global variable to count the amount of ticks for our trade or for our expert advisor. Now, the very first thing we actually did was use the print function to print hello world, and that was in the OnInit function. We didn't touch the OnDeinit function. However, I'm sure you're well aware of what it does. We're going to come to that a little bit later on. And then finally, we actually started using our expert advisor in the OnTick function, and we actually had a function, for example, that calculates the ticks received count, and it adds 1 each time a new tick is received, and then we commented the ticks received over here. We also added additional text just as, you know, it helps us out, and it will be the foundation moving forward for our expert advisor. So that is essentially it for today. So this is the very start of our expert advisor, the start of something very powerful and very new, which is super, super exciting. I hope you're all super excited to be going on this journey. If you have any questions, of course, join the Discord. There's about 2,000 members in the Discord. Feel free to ask your questions in there or leave it in the comment section of this video. And the other thing is, of course, subscribe. So I'm going to be uploading a new video for this series each and every week, uploading at 9 p.m. Wednesday Australian time. So whatever that is for you around the world, I don't know, but that's the time. And the other thing is my main content, of course, will be also coming out once a week every Sunday, 9 o'clock Australian time again, PM. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into what's to come. Again, subscribe, hit the bell notification button, and leave a comment as well. And like this video if you found it helpful. So saying that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Happy trading, happy coding as well, and I'll see you in the next one.